Because I'm always learning new things about these games, stuff that should be at the forefront of my mind gets pushed to the back, and it often has to be reiterated to me a couple times before it really sticks. The process usually goes, my friend Juices teaches me a concept, Broly kind of reiterates that concept, and then it becomes cemented after I watch like a video about it or something a few days later, often sometimes even weeks later. And in yesterday's case, I wanted to learn a little bit more about downloading your opponent and reading your opponent within a specified amount of time, whether it's the first to 2 or first to 3, because that's a pretty short amount of time to learn a lot about a player. And this is what Brian F had to say on the subject. Take a look.
So those are the two main things I look at: pacing and neutral, and their defensive habits, which includes throw tech or mashing jab. So those are like key things in Street Fighter V to look for, but there's a lot of subtle things that I'm not really going to get into in answering that. But for Street Fighter V, those two things for sure. For tournament sets against players you don't know, those things are like quick things that I try to identify and kind of pigeonhole you in what kind of player you're like and how I will approach you.
I think this is just a very good baseline to have, because when you load into a game after learning all this new stuff, you have an idea of what you want to happen on the screen, but sometimes you just don't know how to get there because your brain is thinking about too many different things. So if you always have the baseline of looking for someone's tempo and looking for defensive habits, everything else will sort of fall into place. It's a good foundation. So let's break it down a little bit further and kind of talk game plans when you do run into these different situations, right? You're going to run into people who play ridiculously fast. They just run at you. They kind of are throwing their body at you, whether their character is built for it or not. You'll play zoners who can rush you down. You'll play rush down Guile. You'll play rush down Sim. Just all kinds of crazy stuff. And to me, when it comes to playing people like that, it's not really playing the matchup anymore. It's playing against the player more so, because they're going to make a mistake at some point by playing that fast and that reckless. And often, even if it doesn't mean they're throwing out super negative moves at you, it's that in order to rush you down, in order to get in, they have to dash, they have to jump, they have to take a risk, and that's usually your opening to get something done. The problem is, and why that playstyle works so effectively, is that the opening is often very small, but it is there, and it often is repetitive against those type of players. If you've ever played against a Ken who rushes you down, puts you in the corner, and then neutral jump like heavy, I think it's heavy punch, the one that comes down really far, they'll do it like 2 or 3 times until you DP them. That's when you have to start looking for like pattern recognition and figuring out what they like to do. But that's very much easier said than done when somebody is just running at you and you kind of panic a little bit. What I personally do, and I don't know if this is the correct answer for you or your playstyle, is I just block a lot and look for the gap and look where they're trying to reset pressure. That's kind of where I'm at whenever I play against a wild Ken or something. And that works to varying degrees, because sometimes I don't find the gap and then I just get rushed down and I'm in the corner for 35 seconds and then I lose because I don't have enough patience to deal with it. Speaking of patience, let's talk about the opposite end of the spectrum, the players who don't do anything, who wait for you to come to them, who kind of turtle and just sit there, right? The same thing can be said about patience. I don't have the patience to even beat them sometimes because I just want to run at them and get in. And then they're not really giving me what I want either, right? They're not whiffing any buttons. They're not doing anything. It's up to me to open them up. And sometimes I have issues doing that. But what becomes the most effective thing in those kind of matchups is neutral jumping fireballs, because then you're not taking any chip damage from the fireball and their zoning is not really doing anything for them, as well as walking and blocking forward makes the zoner feel like they need to do something in order to not get stuck in the corner and stuck under pressure. So what this often means is, let's say Guile, for example. Guile is throwing a bunch of sonic booms, you're walking and blocking, neutral jumping, whatever, and you're getting closer and closer to him, and then the Guile player feels like he needs to dash in and do something, or he feels like he needs to jump in and do something, or he needs to approach you and take a risk in some way in order to stop himself from getting cornered, and that is your opening. Oftentimes when we think about opening somebody up, we think about rushing them down and like throw or strike mix-ups, but another way of doing so is just by using your movement options in order to make them feel pressured to open themselves up, if that makes sense. They have to open themselves up to taking a risk and making a mistake. Now let's move on to defensive options. This one's a little bit more ambiguous, a little bit harder to understand, but these show themselves in the forms of when you press a button, for example, like if you press stand medium kick on Cammy, it's a good poke. Does the opponent swing directly afterwards? Because if they do, you can press stand heavy punch. Or do they jump right afterwards? You have to be ready to DP. It's what they do after they block, or if they're blocking at all. And other times it comes on their wake up, right? You get a knockdown and you go to throw them and they immediately tech, right? You're like, wow, how did they know I was gonna throw so fast? And then you tell yourself, oh, I'm just gonna strike next time. I'm gonna press down medium punch, and then they block. This usually means is that they're delay teching, right? So then you need to shimmy them to blow them up. Otherwise, if they continue to take those throws, then keep throwing them, because then they have to think, next time I wake up, do I need to tech? Or do I need to delay tech? Or do I need to press a button? What's going to happen? Because he's probably going to strike me this time. And then you throw them again, right? It's a mix-up. And then usually after that, they'll start delay teching, and then you can shimmy and just rotate through those options as you see fit. That part can be a little bit simpler to identify, but the part about pressing a button and then realizing what they like to do after they block something can be a little bit more ambiguous, because sometimes they don't even know what they like to do after they block a button. They're just kind of mashing. And usually your character has a really good poke that warrants a response a lot of the time. For example, Chun-Li's stand heavy punch, people will press after it, and then the Chun-Li player will identify what they like to do afterwards. Will they jump after I press this button? Will they try and press afterwards? What's going to happen? And then even when you're on the defensive side, it flips, right? After I block this poke, is he going to press another one? Or can I backdash? Or what's going to happen here? That's where the mind games start, and kind of the hard part starts, I guess, is flipping from offense to defense on a dime. I'm not very good at it myself. But in order to keep it a little bit simplified and not overwork myself, I'm just going to focus on identifying the tempo and checking for defensive options. That's kind of what I'm going to work on for the next, I guess, few hours. Anyways, I hope this helped you out in some way. I know you might have seen that Brian F video already, but I thought that point was good enough for me to make a whole another video on it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you're not subscribed already, please consider doing so. I'll talk to you again very soon.